Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, we are joined by Nicole Short and Sean Beaton, two members of the divisional team with Grasslands Public Schools. We're looking forward to hearing the journey Grasslands has taken with collaborative response, particularly in relation to the impact that it's had on how they support schools and students with complex needs. So let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts.
Welcome to another episode of Leading Collaborative Response. I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson. Today we're joined by Nicole Short and Sean Beaton. Nicole has been in education for over 20 years, with 10 as a teacher at various levels, including a year as a learning support teacher. After a decade as an administrator of a K-9 school, Nicole moved into the director position where she is now in her third year. All of her time has been with Grasslands, a school division that she loves.
And for the past 27 years, Sean has been a classroom teacher, school administrator, division coordinator, and assistant superintendent. The bulk of his classroom experience was in high school humanities, but he has also taught grades 5 to 12. He has a passion for supporting students and teachers to ensure they both have the tools they need to find success.
So welcome to both of you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
So why don't we just jump in first by learning a little bit more about Grasslands Public Schools. Could I ask one of you to share with our audience where Grasslands located, some info about the schools, and please share with our audience what makes Grasslands a very unique school division here in Alberta.
So I can start us off, and Nicole can jump in and correct me where need be, which is generally her role with me. So Grasslands Public Schools is situated in the southeast corner of our province. We are a division of approximately 3,600 kids. We have 13 schools and 7 colony schools. It is, I say this all the time, one of the most diverse communities and divisions in Alberta, if not one of the most diverse per capita. And that's all really because of where we are. Just on the corner of town here in Brooks, we have an international company that hires globally. They are a beef processing plant, fully staffed. They operate with anywhere between 5,000 and 6,000 people. And so they are the largest employer in our community, second only to, we are second only to them. And they bring in folks from all over the world. We've got a very, very diverse cultural community as well as linguistic community because of that, which if our superintendent, Scott Brandt, was with us, would say is definitely a strength of ours. In addition, in our rural communities, like I said, we serve Hutterite colonies. We have low German speaking Mennonite population, and our traditional kind of rural folks in Alberta are farmers and ranchers, and it makes for a very, very unique place to be and work. And I think that's what is so special about Grasslands, that in a small area, you have such incredible diversity. You get a very interesting experience, unlike any you will in smaller communities But a lot of the issues and a lot of the things that our teachers managed kind of mirror what they would see in larger centers in our big metro boards. So it is a wonderful place to be.
I can remember being in one of the schools, and I forget how many languages they said were spoken at home when they looked across their entire student population, but it broaches on. When I was at Brooks Comp, when I was an administrator there, we figured we were right around 100 languages and dialects within the school. And that's indicative of most of our city schools for sure. There would be that level for sure.
That United Nations represented across your playground.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I think that does provide, when you think about new teachers coming into this profession, I think Grasslands just offers that really unique setting where we're small, but we are mighty because we have so many different cultures, so many languages. You're not going to get this rich experience anywhere else. We are definitely unique in that respect.
So, Sean, can you give us just a brief overview of the history of collaborative response in Grasslands?
Sure. So I came to the division 10 years ago in 2014. And at that time, both you and Kurtis gave a presentation here in the division about the collaborative response model. And at the time, it was taken up kind of in pockets throughout the division, school by school. Administrators took what they could, they brought that into their teachers. And so I think it was more ad hoc in terms of implementation at that time. And that went on for a number of years through different iterations and different strategies that they used it. And over time, we came to, post-pandemic, and we're looking for a way to reconnect, to have more collaboration within the division. The senior leadership team saw a number of areas that we felt that could be addressed with what was collaborative response model and just collaborative response moving forward. And so in 2021, the senior team decided that we were going to engage in quite an extensive process, not just ad hoc, but a system-wide for all of our administrators in changing how we approach supporting both teachers and students. And so we, because of our social distancing rules that still existed, we all met in a hotel because our boardroom was too small to maintain those distances. Met in a boardroom here in Brooks in a hotel and began our new collaborative response journey. And as I said, system-wide, not just within one school or with one administrator. And it was a very intentional process to start with very almost, we needed to go slow to go fast. Yeah. And so we said, we're just going to start with our administrators. We're going to make sure everybody has the same language. We're going to make sure everybody has the same orientation before we go any further. And so we took the entire year to develop plans and strategies related to collaborative response before we even thought of taking it out to the wider employee groups with our teachers and others.
Awesome. And I think that was one of the things that really stuck with us in this second iteration of collaborative response is the system wide intention and implementation, and not we do one workshop and then everyone figure out how to do this. We're going to engage in an ongoing conversation. So I think that's going to be really interesting for audience to hear how you as a system have supported schools and then adopted a lot of the work at the divisional level as well.
And it's fascinating how many, when we look at how much has gone on in Grasslands, the layers of collaboration and the layers of collaborative teams all the way across the schools, but across the division too, is just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think we talked a little bit about this, having done presentation last week for other superintendents at the fall CAST conference. And you're right, Lorna, that notion of layers. And when you start, at least when I start talking about these things, I start going, and then there's so many pieces to really kind of go through. But the bottom line is that it was not a one and done, like you said, Kurtis. It was, we're going to start with this portion, we're going to make sure everybody is on the same page. You're going to get feedback. We'll do planning. We'll take the entire school year, and then we'll take the next step. And I think that's what's made it something that has really ended up dramatically changing how we operate.
So I want to go to that idea of how you operate. That collaborative response really has become part of the jurisdiction's identity in a sense. And Nicole, we shared right off the bat that your move from classroom teacher to learning support teacher to administrator and now into a director, you've really had a chance to see collaborative response through 4 different sets of experiences, really. From your perspective, in thinking of each one of those roles, why do you think collaborative response has become a foundational part of who Grasslands is as a jurisdiction?
Well, I think, as you said, whenever we have meetings about kids, I've sat at all sides of that table. I've seen it from 4 different perspectives, and as I've grown in my career with my experiences as well. And I think we hit a point where, as a division, we saw the need to bring everyone to the table in a more structured format, with just a little dose of accountability along with it. We had tried other methods, but I believe that accountability piece, it just wasn't there as it needed to be. So we knew we needed something different. We needed something more structured. Now, when we come together, all key players know their roles. They know what their responsibilities are, or their action items, if you will. I believe when we get together now to meet about key issues or students, we all walk away with that purpose and a reason to come back together to discuss the progress or where we're at with those action items. All that we do with collaborative response in Grasslands is focused on meeting the needs of our students, but it's done in a collective manner, which I think is key. It's no one person's job to solve the key issue or to enact the strategies or to gather the data. We work as a team. And I think because we've made that integral to all aspects of our division, it truly is a collective vision for what we want for our kiddos and for our staffs.
So we did have a chance last year to engage in a podcast with Scott, the superintendent, and one of the administrators from one of the schools that talked about how the work has been implemented across all schools. So I don't know if we're going to go into that within this conversation, but we would love to hear some of the key pieces that weren't addressed in that podcast, and would love to start with a little bit of how has the division set up support for administrators through your collaborative response? We'll turn it over, and just if you could share as specifically as possible to give listeners a bit of a peek into how you're supporting your administrators. We'll start there, and then we're going to move into some of the students.
I think I'll start with one, and that's the feedback sessions that you two engage in with our administrators. I think, and just to set that up, you schedule times to review meetings, you sit in on collaborative team meetings, you sit on those meetings that are happening at the school level to provide feedback to administrators on facilitation, on the structures that we have in place. And I think that has helped move practice forward immeasurably. I know, inviting somebody into your building to sit in on meetings can be a little bit nerve-wracking for sure. But having an outside viewpoint to look at what you're doing with your staff and whether or not, you don't see all those things. When you're embroiled in the meeting, when you're going through, whether you're facilitating or not, you don't see all of the different pieces that happen or really go through some of the language sometimes, but having that outside viewpoint to watch and listen and say, did you notice that? And I think those reflection components, I know when I've talked to administrators, when they've come back from those sessions and reviewing the feedback, they've made substantive changes to how they operate, which only improves the outcomes for students because, again, go back, everybody's on the same page, the same language, it's the same message, and the continuity continues. And I think from an administrative standpoint, when we have teachers And we do have teachers that move from school to school, or administrators from school to school. That continuity really promotes success. You're not having to go in and learn something a little bit different, or something just, the language, oh, well, we call it this here. It's the same language, it's the same templates, it's the same process. So I think having you both provide that feedback to administrators has been absolutely, like I said, immeasurable. And then at a division level as well, where we sit and go through and talk about all the feedback you have, the feedback at a division level, just again, creates those multiple layers of, as Nicole said, of both accountability, but also continuity.
I was just going to jump in too, because I've really appreciated when we have a chance to write up that feedback and then debrief with the leadership teams, having members of the divisional team part of those conversations, reviewing the feedback after, has, I know, really been helpful to be able to see, are there some consistent themes? Are there things that we need to come back and review or reiterate with our teams? Or are there schools that we could be connecting to one another? Because in
there's
the feedback,
learning across schools too.
There's something that this school could really benefit from hearing from another school's perspective.
The other thing is that really taking that frame of support, like you guys have really embraced the idea that everything that you do is either about supporting schools or supporting students, or in some instances
Supporting
it's both.
leadership,
and that really plays out in a really positive way. I was visiting with a principal not too long ago from your division, and he said, from the different divisions that he has been in, he felt that he has never been in such a supportive place, that he can really rely on the district team to help him with whatever he needed, and is feeling really supported. Well, I think that that's a great, that's an amazing statement.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and so I also think, sorry, Kurtis, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Nicole, if you could build upon that, and I think it would be interesting to also hear about how you've adopted some of the collaborative team meeting structures into your admin meetings.
Yes, so I think that's been super valuable. So every month when we hold our admin council meetings, our administrators are broken into groups based on, it could be our K-9 group or our city elementary, so on and so forth. And we hold a CTM every month. Our administrators bring their key issues. We, as the division leaders, we are assigned to the different groups. It doesn't mean we facilitate them all. We actually rotate through the roles so that everybody has an opportunity to be the facilitator or the note taker, or vice versa, whatever. And it's been really positive, because I know, just speaking from the group that I'm involved in, we have a fairly new administrator in that group, new to leadership in general. And he just so appreciates that time, because when those key issues come, he walks away with strategies. And what I've also seen is groups are coming together for professional learning based upon the key issues they brought to those meetings, which has been fabulous. And I've been able to sit in on some of those professional learning days. And it's just been great to see those school staffs come together, which helps alleviate that concern when you are a small school and you're the only 4, 5, 6 math teacher or 7 to 9 LA teacher. You have all those folks to collaborate with and to build those different strategies in your toolbox. So I think that admin CTM allows us to work with admin to model the process so that administrators can then go back into their buildings to really bring it alive for their staff.
So just to paint us a picture, what might be a key issue that's been brought to one of those meetings by an administrator? What would be an example?
I would say, well, from my group, one of the things that has come up would be, again, how do you find those collaborative moments for staff who are, say, the only elementary, grade 4 math teacher?
Yeah.
So that has been a key issue that came up for our group, is finding ways to make collaboration work for people who teach the same subjects at the same grade levels. And when they came together, they pulled up their PL calendar for the year, because that's something we do divisionally. We have a division calendar that goes out to all the schools. It tells what days our staff runs PL, and it lets them see what days they have available to them. And so it allowed them to come together, pull those calendars and say, okay, what do you have going the second Friday in November? Because here's what I was doing. If you guys would like to join me, or let's make a change and come up with a way to bring our teachers together. So they really problem solved in that CTM, how they could bring their folks together, whether it was virtually or in person, to work together as a team.
And I think that's outstanding to, like you said, not only model the process to just continue to build up their confidence and capacity, but when I think about the vulnerability that would be part of those conversations, that no one ever feels alone. And when I come up with a key issue, it's not reflective of my lack of skill as a leader. It's recognizing, no, we all have issues that are surfacing. What do we do?
Well, and being able to reach out in a natural part of your process now to others to say, hey, what do you do? Like, really, that's what that key issue process is intended to do, is open the door so we can share our practice.
Yes, exactly.
So then, Sean, so we have CTMs, collaborative team meetings happening at schools about students. We have collaborative team meetings happening at admin council meetings about key issues for schools. But then there's another layer of collaborative team meetings happening at the division level about your schools. Can you describe what that looks like? We'll be right back to continue this episode. Are you looking to maximize the collaborative capacity of your school or district? Are you wanting to take your professional learning communities or response to intervention work to the next level? Have you started the work in collaborative response but are looking to reignite or deepen your plans? We would love to have you join us at the 2025 Collaborative Response Retreat happening May 2nd and 3rd in beautiful Lacombe, Alberta.
Over the 2 days, we have an intentionally designed program of breakout sessions and sharing, along with supported team planning time to ensure that you walk away with a plan for introducing or strengthening collaborative response in your organization for the upcoming year. With a concentrated focus on team planning, networking, and individualized support for your school, the Collaborative Response Retreat is an outstanding opportunity to grow your team's understanding and implementation of this powerful support framework. We are also planning some fun time so you can relax and enjoy activities as a team in our historic community of Lacombe in central Alberta.
In addition, participants will gain access to an extensive repository of online resources to deepen their understanding and support ongoing implementation. Plan to join a growing network of educators dedicated to responding to the diverse needs of their learners. We've capped our attendance at 140 participants, so make sure to register early to secure your team spot. We're looking forward to seeing you in Lacombe in May.
Join the email list at bit.ly/25CR retreat. Wait. That's bit.ly/25CR retreat. Wait.
Join the list to access an early registration window before general registration opens. And if you register during that window, we're going to say thank you with an additional free gift valued at $200. Join the early notification list now. And now back to our conversation.
So we, as an admin group, we will we call them ILET plans. Our administrators put together instructional leadership for exemplary teaching plans, and they include their professional learning schedules and calendars and goals and what have you. And our senior team, along with Nicole and some of our coaches, it's kind of all hands on deck to do these meetings. Sit down virtually like this when we go through to discuss their plans. We also talk about collaborative response. And so depending on the focus for the year, we will have questions, or even the term, if we break it down that far, we will have questions that we pose back to administrators to assess how things are going related to collaborative response in their buildings. We'll talk about their data. perhaps the focus is on how the data is being used, the trends, what do they see in the collaborative team meetings? Are there any issues that keep coming up over and over? What is the data telling? And based on those conversations, we create a rubric, and the rubric includes color codes, and then just as you would in collaborative response at a school level with students, then we can kind of decide, grade, if you will, assess how everybody's doing with the process, and then we can assign support if need be. We can kind of distribute our time if we need to work with folks to help improve the overall application of collaborative response across the division. The way that we do that, we bring everything together. We sit down and usually with one of you and talk about what we're seeing, talk about how that review process went. And I think, again, it's just another layer of, I don't want to say accountability so much as those check-ins and support. And like Lorna said, that the whole goal is supporting students, teachers, our administrators, so that we're all moving forward. So whatever the goals school-based might be, we want to make sure that we're providing that level of support for folks. So I think those have been incredibly helpful. We started doing that right off the hop. That was something that we began after that first year of introduction to administrators. In the second year of implementation, we started having these meetings, and we started them on Zoom, and we've continued that actually because it just helps us get to more schools. We are a bit geographically diverse as well. We're separated by distance, and so doing them virtually allows us to have multiple meetings in a day and not have the windshield time. So I think the information that's come back has allowed us to develop action plans, talk about support, talk about any PL that we might need at our level, and continue the goals forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. Nicole, within the student services side of things, you have made some adjustments too over the last few years, and really aligning it with that same thinking around, what's our response and how do we engage collaboration to get there. So love to have you explain a little bit of the changes that you've seen through student services.
And from sitting in your presentation last week, I loved how we went from traveling roadshow to where we're at now. So if you can share what that has looked like.
Absolutely. So when I came into this position, I had the benefit of having lived the Grasslands life for so many years in so many ways, and seeing how student support had evolved over time. And of course, coming in as a new person to the role, you don't want to make too many big changes too quickly. However, I felt there was a need for some change, especially if we were going to look at collaborative response as a whole system approach. And I felt that's what we needed. I had conversations with Sean about our meeting structures the way they were and how we needed to make that shift. If we were going to embrace collaborative response, we were going to wholeheartedly do it. And so we moved away from our traditional meeting schedule where my entire team would go out to every school 3 times a year. So those get to be pretty expensive meetings when you think about it. And those meetings tended to be where schools would provide a laundry list of names of kids they wanted to talk about. And in a lot of cases, they often were updates. Things are going well. And so my team would look at me after and go, why are we meeting to discuss things if things are going well? Like, you're absolutely right.
And when you say your team, just give us a snapshot of who would that be? So
when we go to these meetings, it would be myself, my early learning coordinator, 1 or 2 of my psychologists, my speech language pathologist, my occupational therapist.
Like entire team.
Oh, the whole team. So, and that's why the traveling roadshow, I think, got dubbed that way, because it was like circus clowns coming out of a car, or just piles of us come out of a car to go to these meetings. And so we just felt like we weren't really getting the bang for our buck on these meetings. And I think schools felt the same way. I think I can safely say that because I used to be in the schools in those meetings. And so we moved to the collaborative response structure because we felt as I said before, if the entire division is doing it, shouldn't student support be doing it? That just makes sense. Yeah. And B, it just works better for everybody. Yeah. And I challenge anyone to argue with me on that, because we walk into those meetings, and when we use those processes, things get done. And I think we can all walk away from there feeling like we have a job to do. Mm-hmm. We have a live document that tells who's responsible for what. And those things are happening. I can go back in a few days later and look at those case consult notes from schools, and I can see people checking off what they've accomplished on their task list, sometimes with little notes about when we meet next time, I need to update you on this. So it is a living, breathing document that never goes away. And I think that's such a big part of it. We also aligned our psych ed referrals and psych consults to the process as well. So we get less of those emails where they get a new student who comes with some needs, surprise, surprise, and we immediately need a psych ed. I'm like, now they use the process with the layers of the meetings, and that's not the first response we get. They're trying all these different strategies. They're sending folks out to help connect families to doctors, so on and so forth. It is a team effort. We also, our early learning coordinator runs a monthly CTM with our entire early learning teams from the schools. So they bring their key issues, they work on them together, and they're walking away with strategies right then in the moment, which has been absolutely rich for them. We also worked with our learning support teachers to create a division-wide continuum of supports, which the conversations that came out of that were second to none. Mm-hmm. And as I said in our presentation earlier or last week, the debates around what is this a tier 1 strategy or is it a tier 2 strategy? And those debates were marvelous because we did find in certain situations that might be a tier 1, but in others it might be a tier 2. So I think that was just rich conversation for our learning support teachers, who are those point people in our buildings. They're leading a lot of that professional learning for their staffs. So we've made a lot of changes. I'm not going to say they were all instant, because they weren't. They take time. And when we get those case consult referrals before the school support team meetings happen, as I said in our presentation, I got to be a broken record that we needed to see those layers occur first. And I'm finding already, even this year, the amount of case consult referrals we've had as compared to last year are very, very tiny. They're doing the works in their buildings.
That stood out to me huge. As really substantial. Do you mind sharing of what the referral number last year at this time to what it is this year at this time?
Oh my gosh. If I had to ballpark it, I would say by November, we would have had, I would say anywhere to 12 to 15, maybe even 20 meetings. And this year I'm probably at, counting what I have this week, 7.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. And that's really what you hope to have happen.
Yes.
We talk all the time about how in classrooms we sometimes reach out, and it's not for any fault to teachers. It's
not at all.
No, it's usually lack of process.
Yeah. And they automatically go from, well, I'm struggling with this child, so I need an ed psych. They jump all the way up because that's what they know. But yet, when every school has the systematic processes in place in terms of their layered teams, and then for you, Nicole, going beyond that is the how does the district link into that school-wide of supports? And once that gets really going and in place, then you really should see the decline in referrals for your services.
And one of the things that I've noticed this year as well, one of our schools, last year, they weren't really doing the school support team meetings. And this year, I got a call from one of the administrators she said, I just want to talk to you about this kid. I need to run some things by you. I said, absolutely. And then I said, have you done a school support team meeting for this student? Because this feels like a prime candidate for that. And she said, well, we are going to do one, but would you mind attending? I said, of course not. I said, I don't go to all of them because obviously there would just not be the time for that. And I don't need to be at those all the time. But she said, I'd just like you to come to see how I run it. And I said, well, I said, I won't facilitate. Do you want me to be a participant or an observer? And she said, I would like you to be a participant, but I would like some feedback afterwards. I said, absolutely, I will do that for you. And so I do get invited once in a while to those, and I love it because it allows me to see how the process is working in the schools and to help guide them to whether it's time for that case consult or whether they've got some stuff to work with and they can go back with their team and work on those strategies.
You know, I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book Upstream by a gentleman named Dan Heath. He talks about in this book, he starts off with a parable of these two friends are at the side of a river and they notice a child drowning. So they jump into the river and pull the child out. And then all of a sudden another one comes by and then another and another and another. And they're overwhelmed trying to pull out these children out of the river. And the one friend gets up to leave the river and the other one shouts out, where are you going? What about all these kids? And the response is, I'm going upstream to find out who's throwing these kids into the river. And the whole idea is when you can apply upstream thinking, it really is about putting systems and processes in place. It doesn't mean that we won't have a child that needs our help. We will, but we're not going to get overwhelmed with a large number of them, which is often the case. I've got a lot of districts that we're working with now that can't keep up with the number of referrals for external services. And a lot of the times it's because the systems and structures within the school aren't clarified.
I would agree. And I think also in Grasslands, we're very fortunate. Well, I don't know if it's that we're fortunate or we've put the work in, but we've built relationships with some of our external partners. And I don't even just mean external from schools being division. I mean in our community. And so often when we have case consults, there's times where we will bring outside agencies into those meetings. Child and Family Services have been there. Our interpreters have been there. FA or FSCD has been there because we have built those relationships. It truly is collaborative. We've got folks working with us for kids. Yeah. And I think the conversations around that table and some of those external agencies walk away with those action items and they're getting them done. Mm-hmm. So really, does it get any better than that?
Yeah. One of the really impactful things through the work that you guys have been doing across your district is that idea that, we come together, and this is one of the big changes we see is we come together and one person, the learning support teacher, walks away with all the actions, or the principal walks away with all the actions. Yep. But here you have seen, and you were just talking about the fact that that whole team, a number of people sitting around that table are going to walk away with action. So it truly is that collaborative, actionable piece that happens through that process. I want to just take a moment. Sean, a little while ago, you had shared with me some reflections from some of those external people being part of this process. Do you want to just share that?
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
Feeling overwhelmed with the expectations being placed on teachers, leaders, and educational systems to respond to the diverse needs of our learners?
Are you wanting to take your PLCs and RTI efforts to the next level?
It definitely takes a highly coordinated framework of structures and processes to maximize the collective capacity of your team to ensure success for all students. Collaborative Response is that framework.
Order your copy of our bestseller, Collaborative Response, 3 foundational components that transform how we respond to the needs of learners, which includes access to a comprehensive companion website. Join the thousands of schools using the framework to ensure high levels of success for students and staff. And now back to our conversation.
So, and it's funny, I know exactly which meeting it was about, and where that came out. And as Nicole just said, we have had division level support team meetings, case consult meetings, where we've had outside partners, and the feedback came from a children's services caseworker. We had a division level support team meeting for a very, very complex young man who did have an open file with children's services, and so the caseworker was able to come. We invited her to sit with us, as well as our CMP, because unfortunately they were involved with the family also. And everybody's guided by their own privacy pieces and what they can share. Luckily, we're all guided by Children's First. They acted so we could share that information. And we always, as all meetings begin, we started that meeting with celebrations, which really changed the entire tenor of the meeting, where you're dealing with a very, very complex young man who, by all accounts, there's not a lot of positives going on for this person in their young life. But as soon as we started with celebrations, people start thinking about, oh yeah, and then this and this, and there was lots and lots of positives that came out. And then we went through the entire meeting. Everybody had an opportunity to raise concerns, talk about strategies. And after about an hour and a half, we all had action items, including Children's Services and our CMP. And I got an email back from the caseworker to say it was probably the most well-organized, positive meeting that she's ever been a participant in. And I would be honest that sometimes with outside partners, those meetings where you're trying to problem solve can be very frustrating on both sides, for sure. But I think when you go into it with that really scripted agenda, the fact that we're all walking away with some action items and that we have some level of accountability with each other really helps. And it makes everything, Del Ickey used to talk when he worked with Cass. When I first joined Cass, he was leading mentorship, and he talked about the number one focus that you need to think about is it has to be laser-like. You have to have that laser-like focus in order to find success. And division level support team meetings, the way that we've organized them through your suggestions, are just that. They have a laser focus, which is supporting the student. And we all walk away with those actions and can then implement them. And I've had the opportunity now to have 3 or 4 case conference meetings with external partners, and it's always the same feedback. Thank you very much. That was really well done. It was well orchestrated, and it's not me or one individual. It's that team approach that we can collaborate through.
That's so exciting. And it's always so difficult to be in those meetings when you know that there are so many challenges for families and for students, and that everybody around the table are really there to help and support. But sometimes because the situation, it can be a difficult conversation. But yeah, with those structures, it certainly makes a difference. And as you share that, Sean, I get goosebumps.
It's interesting though, too, because as I reflect back on earlier days as an administrator, I'd often walk into those conversations without a plan, no agenda. We just sit down, we do some introductions, and then someone would be taking notes, but it would be a blank document. And as a result, it would go in any which direction. It was really unpredictable.
Agreed.
Yeah, and oftentimes you'd walk out with no more of a plan than you had when you went in.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I've been a part of a few of those.
Yes, where you walk out going, what now?
I know.
So we've got a couple questions we'd love to pose to each of you. So jump in, who would ever like to go first. The first one is, we always ask our guests on this podcast to finish this statement. As a result of collaborative response, we have seen blank. How would you finish that?
A decrease in the emergency cries for help. Schools are leaning into the meeting layers. They're trying to solve the issues in-house. And honestly, this just frees my team up to do that ground level work with kids.
Nice.
And I would just add to that I think we have seen a complete restructure of how we operate, and being able to, like as Nicole said, being able to distribute support in a very organized way, in a very intentional way, saves everybody time, and it allows us to place support where needed at that moment. And I think that without the change in language, the change in orientation, I said this last week, is that if I was to say what's the biggest thing that precipitated that, is that we stopped tiering students and we started tiering supports. As we stopped looking at students as, okay, well, they're a tier 1, 2, 3, 4, what have you, and said, rather, these are the supports that we have and can bring to bear. And I think that really, again, changed the entire orientation to how we look at what we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it really is about, now it's about what the adults do in the buildings. It's about how we support, as opposed to this child is like this, and so therefore they're tier 2.
They're your responsibility.
And there's a bit of, we can't control that. But now when we focus on supports, then it truly is our responsibility to ensure that we've got things in place for students, regardless of their need.
So this obviously does not come to surprise of anyone that's listening to this. We know the work hasn't been a straightforward line for Grasslands. There's been lots of loops and iterations of learning. So in the spirit of, if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give your past self in relation to the collaborative response work that you've done?
Dive in and trust the process.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I think patience, you have to have patience. We talked about this last week, and that you can't, it just one step at a time. You come to a point, I think, and we're still in this, like, all of these positives, there's no doubt there's been such amazing growth and reorganization, but that's not to say that we're issue free by any stretch. Yeah. I think we still have, very, very complex students that require a complex approach to support. And there are days even within all of these really positive, well-organized structures, we go, I'm not entirely sure what we do next. And so I think there's, in my opinion, we won't get to a point where we will have all the answers. It's never going to happen, but we have the structures that allow us to find those answers and allow us to try. And I think that's a big one, is that learning is messy. We know that. At Kurtis, you talk, it's not a straight line. No. It's all over the place, and that's okay. And as Nicole said, trust that process. Allow yourself to make mistakes, pick it up, move forward. What do we do next? But always with that laser focus along the way.
I very, very much appreciate that. So as we look to wrap up here, can you just share out with our audience, if they had any questions or wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way to be able to do that?
I would say by email.
Yeah, email. Email is always going to be best, because we're not usually in the buildings, and we're often with working with teachers and principals, but via email would be absolutely easy.
Okay, we'll throw the email into the show notes then.
Well, thank you so much, both of you. It's been such a pleasure talking about your work and your journey. And I so appreciate the fact, Sean, that you recognize that, we're not reaching perfection. we're just on to that next progress of the journey. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All the best.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
So we've reached that point of our podcast where we always have a chance to reflect on what were some key learnings or thoughts that came through. And I always love talking with leaders within Grasslands, because the depth of understanding of the approach, the framework is so strong. But I love where they've indicated that It's taken time.
sure.
Where Sean says we needed to have patience and understand that this is a process. It's going to take time. And that, I think, was really exemplified in that conversation.
Yeah, I think the other thing is how they have embraced collaborative response as just the way they do things in Grasslands, and all the way from what's happening, those structures in schools, all the way up to everything that they do at the district level. And that creates that multi-layer of collaboration, but it also creates consistency. So I know that the way that I'm working in my school is the same process and structures as the district is accessing in the work that they're doing.
Well, and I know in talking with their school leaders, they very much appreciate that this is not a, you do this at your level and we'll be checking in on you. They are doing it at their level and they are checking in to support, but they're also mirroring the processes for themselves as well. So they're really living and, well, walking the walk.
Yeah. And when we think about, we know that when we start, especially our collaborative team meeting layer, when people start to engage in that, they struggle with it quite a bit. And there are true challenges in that layer because it's a different process than they typically are accessing at that school level. But here, Grasslands as a district also understand that struggle because they're doing the same thing at the district level as they are within the schools. So that multi-layer approach has been really incredible. And I kind of laughed, Sean, the way as he's describing it, he goes, oh yeah, and then there's
and there's this, and there's this.
And just shows in how many different ways they have used key issue process, ensuring that this is a framework of support at every single level, and really thinking about, what do we do to ensure that students are successful.
Well, and I think that really came through with your idea of support when Sean said, when we stopped tiering our kids and tiered the supports, that was really a fundamental mind shift. And they've not only done that around students, but they also don't tier their schools.
No.
In a sense either. They're tiering the divisional supports and deciding, okay, what do we need to do to help this school take their next step to have to continue to move along the progression of how do we do that together. And again, that whole understanding that this is a learning process that we engage in at the school and at the system level. And so really embracing.
Yeah. And on top of that, is that at the district level, understanding that it's about supporting schools in that the data gathering, they ask questions, they go out to schools in partners, and they have a way. Sean was talking about the rubric, helping them to understand where are they at in this process or this particular part of our school plan at this point in time. But part of that is they come back together in a collaborative team meeting as a district team, and then they determine who will be deployed to support the students. So this speaks to that district deployment of services, but not just based on your school. I'm responsible for your school, so I'll be the one that comes to talk to you. But rather, it's a conversation at that district level of, well, actually, somebody else might be better suited because of the concerns that the school is raising to go out and provide that support.
So one of the other things that really stood out to me, and it's proving out the idea that when you have layers of team established at the school level, it really is about upstream thinking, as I shared, and that if we do it well, it should mean less students requiring those more complex supports, or the ones that are getting there are absolutely the conversations we need to have. And I think that's sensational of Nicole saying, as a result of collaborative response, we've seen a reduction in putting out fires of emergencies that are happening. And to hear the actual number reduction, I think is really, really powerful. It, like she said, it doesn't happen overnight. And I know that she has said in personal conversations with us that it wasn't easy when first starting that process to be able to say, no, we're not going to get involved yet because you haven't deployed this part of the structure or process, but let me come and help you with that process. Let's work on the process and the systems rather than I'm going to respond to every call for help that comes.
And realizing that there's their student services referral form that schools are required to fill out in order to access that level of support is very intentional and really leads to those collaborative structures that are expected in a school. So like she said, she's had to, turn back referral because the school has just said, well, we have this new student, we need an ed psych, but we haven't actually gone through what we have available within the school before accessing those. Now, Nicole, yes, she's had to, she keeps talking through that process with schools so that they understand it and they're starting to see some movement forward. So again, it relates back to that. It takes time and it's not easy. But over time, you start to see the alignment of structures in the school to those structures at the divisional level. They have done such fantastic work.
They really have. So this is going to be an episode that you will want to check out the show notes because we're not only going to include podcasts that we had with Erin, the early learning coordinator that was shared in our conversation here, but then also the other one that we mentioned with Superintendent Scott Brandt and one of their principals, Britta Goldie, will include that. There's also going to be a number of samples and resources that we are garnering from the jurisdiction that will include there for you to be able to review. As always, please reach out if there's questions. There's also a number of different resources there in the show notes to be able to access. We'd really love for you to be able to share this episode with another colleague that would find value. But as always, reach out if there's questions that you have or ways that we can further support. Absolutely. So with that, we wish you all the best. And thanks once again to Sean and Nicole for joining us today. Take care.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.